And Stefan is going to tell us a lot about what he is doing in the research space in relation to the ocean. And I think this is a really good place to start. So Stefan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Rachel, for the introduction. And it is my pleasure to open up this meetup today with a short talk about 10 years of all our oceans and what can be done in the space for the ocean health. So my name is Steffen Knot. I'm head of Sustainable Ocean Business Center in Rostock, part of Fraunhofer. I'm also serving in the United Nations Ocean Decade Committee here in Germany. So if we're talking about the oceans, and that's something that I can only amplify what Sylvia Early, the oceanographer from the US, always mentioned, that the ocean is something we need to take care of because our lives depends on it. The oceans are about 71% of the global space. Every second breath we take comes from the ocean. So if we don't care about ocean health, we are in trouble here on what we do at Earth. And if you see what we're actually doing to the ocean, and everyone of us is quite aware of it, we are not treating the oceans very well. And everybody is quite aware of what we're doing with the ocean plastics, what's getting into the oceans, in particular here by the rivers and the large mega cities in the world. Pollution is happening everywhere, and people are standing up and trying to get the plastics and the garbage out of the ocean. But that's something what we really need to take care of because the water in the ocean is something that feeds us with fish, with water, with air, and it needs to be in a healthy state. But even more, if we go for what you're doing for other activities, and here is, for example, Boris Herrmann, he's a sailor, and he was quite famous in Germany last year because his race around the globe with the Vendée Globe, a sailing vessel, he took it to address topics of climate change and what we are doing here within the Ocean Decade to decarbonize shipping, to make people aware how crucial the status of the ocean is, in particular in the southern oceans. So during his voyage and race around the ocean, he collected ocean data, a data set in the southern oceans 1 times around the globe, and really did a great job to inspire people here in Germany about the status of the ocean, and that we really need to take action to get everything in a better shape, and also that corporates and science needs to work together of achieving this. And so what could actually be a future for the ocean if we think to that? And here it's a quite nice initiative along the Ocean Decade. It's the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, where 15 states working together for a sustainable ocean economy. And here we really need to work together on the one hand to protect our oceans, on the other hand also to use the oceans sustainably, and also to share the economic benefits of the ocean equally among the nations. And here it's really also important that developing industry states and island states are working together to tackle those things. And I'm really excited that this meetup today also brings together new opportunities of how we all together can improve the health of the ocean by our activities. So if you have a look and actually wonder, okay, the oceans are so important for our climate and everything what's going on, you would assume that the oceans was so far well reflected. And actually, it's quite surprisingly that until last year to COP26, the ocean was not reflected in climate negotiations. So despite of the moderate outcomes of COP26, it has been quite a success that the ocean now the first time is part of the Glasgow Climate Pact. So from this year on, everyone who's working on the oceans, working on climate, they're working in one system, and everything we do for climate can also directly be linked to the oceans. And of course, all projects we are talking today as well on blue carbon and everything that takes climate serious now covers also the ocean. And that's of course important because if you see the island nations, and here's one of the speeches of the COP26 of Simon Coffey from Tuvalu. Of course, we all are aware about the rising sea levels, what's happening to the island states. That's on the one thing very important for the people living there, but even more if you go for the ecosystems in the oceans, everything around climate change is quite serious. And a particular topic of today will be definitely coral reefs. So the coral reefs are quite a good indicator about the status of the oceans and what's getting wrong. So here we have to deal with everything, the heat waves that are going through the oceans, that the less oxide in the oceans, and the increased acidification of the oceans. They all have a quite significant impact on coral reefs, what also affects biodiversity losses in the oceans and everything that follows after, even also the economic impact if you think about tourism and other topics that it's linked to coral reefs. It's a really serious topic that we need to tackle climate change also to save the ecosystems below water. And here, of course, it's a great initiative that is already happening, and that's also where Sylvia Early took quite action on, that first of all, we need to protect the oceans. So there's initiative 30 by 30 that until 2030, 30% our oceans should be in marine protected areas to have those hope spots in place that the ecosystems can recover, and we take care about those ecosystems and areas in the oceans who are in a bad state. Second, of course, we need to increase the knowledge about the oceans. And here's one example of a startup from Germany, Plan Blue, who developed an underwater camera really to map the status of coral reefs and also get more data from the oceans, that we all get a better understanding on what can be done to improve, and of course also to get a better understanding what is the baseline for the economic and sustainable use of the ocean. Even more, and that's also important, we need to safeguard what is happening here. So also coral reefs, for example, there are some out there who are nurseries who are trying to recover the oceans. So that's quite relevant that we are here in taking actions on those projects to help the ecosystem and the coral reefs to recover. And here's also one great example. For example, one startup called Coral Vita. They are also trying to nurture corals who are more temperature sensitive. They just won the Earthshot Prize. That is a great opportunity for those guys to scale up their business and really to bring corals who are better fit for the higher temperatures in crucial areas. So all of us here in the audience who are doing new inventions and trying to work on this is a great example. Also, for example, people are working on 3D printing on coral reefs. They have been also in the Earthshot Prize and trying to build up structures on the seafloor to help ecosystems to recover and to build the founding places for the corals as such. And the other hand, of course, is also corporates can take action on recovering. So here's one example where the chocolate company Mars, they have a huge program out there supporting projects in the regions to recover the coral reefs in those areas. And that's also a good example that even more corporates could take action and team up with those NGOs who are supporting that ecosystem restoration in crucial areas. Having mentioned coral reefs, but there are much more things we can do here, and we will talk about this later. So, for example, we will have a huge opportunity to restore ecosystems in the coastal lines. Mangroves are very important for us, for the ecosystems. They have a huge benefit for the ecosystems. They protect the shoreline for storms and water for wind. So a lot have been lost also to aquaculture in the coastal areas. But here we can work together to restore the ecosystems and to also capture carbon from the air and increase the water quality. Another good example are seagrass on the seafloor. A huge opportunity also to store carbon dioxide on the seafloor. Also quite an important area for ocean life in those areas. And also seagrass areas have been lost over the last decades. So here we can also take action to work on this. Also very important, kelp. So kelp at the coastlines are wonderful forests below waterline, very important for sea life and biodiversity. So those can be restored and worked together. And if we talk about kelp, it's also a very good source of new blue bioeconomy. So seaweed can also be used for medicine, for food, for fuel. So also people living nearby the coast can work together with seaweed farmers and bring new economic benefits to the coastal areas and for the ones who would like to protect the oceans. Even more, if we take about what action it can be taken here, and one great initiative that has been launched also at COP26 is the so-called Green-Blue Wall. Some of you might know there's a great green wall that will cover the African island on land. The initiative was started at COP26 by Seychelles. They also would like to expand this green wall into the water and really span a blue wall around the globe of protected areas that there we can have protected ecosystems that really cover the ocean. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to team up and see where we can support those projects around the globe. And having said that, to come back to Sylvia early, we all can do something. And whether we are in the engineering side or research, it's up to us to protect our oceans. It's all for us, and everyone can do something. So let's team up and working together. I'm happy to follow up in the breakout sessions on further talks. So here at Fraunhofer, for example, we're working also on coral reef restoration, on 3D printing with a startup called Hyperion Robotics. So if you have questions afterwards, very happy to team up with you and think what we can do together. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Stefan. That was such an inspiring opener for us for this afternoon. I think you really showed for us the seriousness of the challenge which we are facing in this space with the oceans, but you also showed us how there are opportunities and pathways to really take the next steps right through from the policy level all the way down to delivering on the practical level. And I love your call to action at the end that we can all take our role and make a difference. So thank you very much, Stefan. I would like to move now into the startup space so we can hear from someone who is really working with providing a consumer product in relation to ocean health. And therefore, I would like to introduce you to Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you all. Very excited to be speaking to you all. Thank you for your focus on the oceans. And I'm pleased to speak with you about C Combinator. C Combinator is indeed a startup, though we are 2 years in. We've raised almost $5 million. Next slide, please. And we are excited to be addressing the largest seaweed bloom on the planet. It's a difficult seaweed bloom to deal with, but C Combinator is a public benefit corporation really scaling up the sustainability of seaweed of a difficult type called sargassum. You've heard of it. Next slide, please. The problem is that what happens with sargassum is it's generally been at a reasonable level in the Sargasso Sea, but the Amazon rainforest, as it's been converted to farmland, has had about 80% more fertilizer flowing out the Amazon basin. This has ignited, along with warming oceans, ignited the bloom, and it's really caused multiple problems. One, it builds up on island nations and in Mexico. It builds up in the bays, it rots, it releases methane. Which is a severe amount actually of methane. There are about 40 million tons of seaweed washing up into the bays. Hurts tourism, ecology, and it really is the problem with ecology and the life in the bays. Next slide. So now what we're thinking really. Belt. And you can see the effluent from the Amazon basin there, which really has ignited this bloom. And so we're dealing with this. It is, in a sense, difficult seaweed to deal with, but we figured out how to do that. Next slide, please. We have filed IP that has allowed us to create several products from this seaweed. Next slide, please. The actual we have worked with municipalities and resorts in Mexico where we collect. We have a wonderful operation down there that collects seaweed off the beach before it rots in the most. Biostimulant. And then it also is plastics. We're working with some of the large plastics manufacturers on replacing their fossil fuel oil with biofuel. We're also working on an emulsifier. We have in the marketplace an emulsifier for cosmetics, which really helps. It performs at the exact levels that the market needs, and it's all natural instead of fossil fuel based. We call that C-Balance 2000, and it's getting a lot of interest around the world. And then also finally a leather, which will be announced soon, a bio leather. Next slide. So we are advancing the science on how to do this through an IP process. And we're taking the entire ecosystem and turning what is a real scourge and addresses many of the sustainable development goals. And we are the only ones in the world who can turn it into very valuable products. For every 1 ton of seaweed we collect, we can create $13,000 worth of retail value out of that product through the combination of this cascading biorefinery of biostimulant fertilizer, emulsifiers for cosmetics, leather, and plastics. And we're working on a larger initiative that will really scale this up. Next slide, please. And so really, next slide. The initiative that we're taking really is building on what we have in Cancun, Mexico already, and in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where we do our processing. Next slide. We've taken a multifaceted approach to all of the issues that I've talked about here in terms of the SDGs, the environment, and the impact that it has on tourism in the region throughout the islands. I'm going to tell you about the initiative in a second, but before I do, I want to announce that this actually, we have a partner called Seafields who is working on growing sargassum in the open ocean. It seems odd to want to grow it in the open ocean when there's so much of it now, but we can actually get to gigaton scale by growing it in the open ocean. It's more suitable than kelp or any other seaweed because we can actually see sargassum itself, it floats on the ocean surface and it self-replicates. It doesn't require hatcheries or something to attach to in the open ocean. So it's much easier to recover. It's very efficient in terms of carbon to nitrogen ratio. So we're working with Seafields on growing large scale open ocean farms that could actually valorize the seaweed with our IP and then also sink a lot of it to the abyssal plains should it make sense, working with a lot of IPCC scientists, and they're looking at ways to do this to reach large scale carbon sequestration. Next slide. Our initiative in Cancun, Mexico area, where 74% of this ends up, and there's a 13-kilometer stretch of 69 resorts. Our team down there has started to build consensus that there needs to be a large-scale solution to this entire problem. Next slide. In this region, we have the ability, on the left there, you see the boom in the ocean. We are discussing with Van Oord about whether it's possible to use their maritime technology to collect at large scale. And forgive the busyness of this diagram, but essentially all it is we will collect the sargassum at large scale. We'll turn it into all the products I described before. We will also turn it into bioplastics for some of the largest cosmetics producers in the world. And we will use anaerobic digestion to create energy, biofuels, and all sorts of local products that can be used to create local food, as well as power the resorts instead of fossil fuel diesel. And the carbon credits here are massive. We're talking about large scale, and we're the fastest approved gold standard project ever on a concept note. So we're excited to move forward with all of this and create an integrated, sustainable solution for the economy and the environment. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I can imagine people have got a lot of questions for you on this topic. You really show us how we can take everything that's happening in the ocean health space and really translate that into action through making sure we use integrated and scalable business models. So thank you for that. I have to make quickly a short joke because I believe that you can hear me, but you cannot see me. That's a shame for you. We are working on a solution at the moment, but for now you will have to do with my dulcet tones just over the audio. With that, I think a really nice transition from what Jeff has told us is that all of these things require something that we need to understand more, and that is finance. So with that, I would really like to introduce our next speaker, Pierre, who's going to talk to us about finance in sustainability.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think this is really the good. I can. Do you see the presentation? Yeah. So I think it's a really a good opportunity to combine and especially what has been presented before by Stephen and Geoff will definitely be aligned with what I will explain. So first of all, everybody knows that the ocean is an irreplaceable role. Stefan have been already telling that. And we need to keep in mind the 71% of the Earth's surface. So like Geoff just explained today, there are probably plenty of opportunities to develop new businesses in that ocean, but taking care of the climate change, the biodiversity, and of course, the social impact. So you can see that ocean has a big impact. Most of you knows those figures, but we need to realize that the big part, in addition of the ocean can play, and which has not been really mentioned in the past and already presented by the two previous presentators, is the capacity of CO2 sequestration that we have. And here, of course, we have seen the seagrass, the kelp, and but here I would like to give the example of the whale. Even a whale itself, it's equivalent of 30,000 trees in terms of carbon capture. And the IMF has just made the computation that this gives a value of a whale just on carbon capture on more than $2 million US. So we can value and monetize carbon, which is important in finance as a new element, because we will be able to consider carbon as an asset or as a flow in order to finance transaction. So the blue economy, first we have to understand that the blue economy, the existing one, need to be reshaped. So there is a first work where we have to move from a fossil fuel energy to renewable energy, when we have to reconsider sustainable tourism, when the maritime transport, which is representing 80% of the total goods traded, okay, need to be also propelled by the proper system and engineering. So all these activities need to be aligned with climate change. Fisheries and aquaculture is also important, but we need also to consider the impact of the land with the waste management that we need to take care. 80% of the litter in the ocean are coming from land-based. And you know, the plastic don't need to end up in the ocean. There are many other places where it can end up. So there are few things to reassess. So we need to rethink our economy, and the blue economy is about that. It's about providing economic growth, livelihood, jobs, whereby taking care about the conservation and the regeneration of our nature. The things that I would like to say, which is important, is that it's to look and to be open-minded also to the new opportunities. And some of them has been already presented, so I will not go into detail, but there is plenty of new opportunity of business that can be developed. So mixing conservation and regeneration of nature, of biodiversity, taking care of climate change and developing business is not incompatible. We just need to follow a certain number of tipping points, which has been defined by the UN Global Compact, which can give us some kind of setup of what we need to do and what we need to follow in terms of developing economy in the blue area. So the ocean, the blue economy is really the combination of conservation and conserving the ocean and developing business is absolutely not incompatible. What are the big development area that has been identified? The maritime transport, which is already playing a huge play, as we mentioned, 80% of the total trade. I would like to say also, and this is an OECD figures, that the blue economy today will be the 7th largest GDP country, if we have to believe that the ocean is a country. So you can see that it's already big. And the OECD say that the fastest growing economy will be the blue economy. So from now to 2030, this is where you will develop the biggest part of the business. And why is that? It's because ocean wasn't spoiled. And so you will see new activities for infrastructure and maritime infrastructure. Just before the presenter mentioned to build up a big platform in the middle of the ocean in order to develop seaweed. There are plenty of such projects which are being put in place with kelp, with seaweed, and with a huge impact on carbon capture. But it means that we will have to link this platform to the border, to the land. So the importance and the rethinking about the value and the role of the ports will be important. There is a lot of maritime resources that we can then, fishing, aquaculture is one, seaweed, we talk about it, but there are plenty of other resources that we don't know that we may probably extract from the sea and use for completing and maybe changing the way that we are developing our own economy. And last but not least, conservation and regeneration of biodiversity is a source of new business. We don't have to think only about a large project. We can think also by the multiplicity of small projects. And I will come back to that when we will talk about scale, because everything is about scale. So blue economy, it's about innovation. We talk about that. It's talk about positive impact. We need to measure impact. We need to show that we have a positive impact on climate change and biodiversity. It's also about creating new infrastructure. When we talk to investor about new infrastructure, and we can demonstrate that it has a value, then the people will hear that. And it's about also integrating sea conservation, and I'll insist on it, the capacity to regenerate and to regenerate biodiversity, which is higher than on the sea than on the land. Technology is important, science is important. So it's been explained by Steph at the beginning of this presentation. So where we can focus on the big things, maritime transport infrastructure. I want to mention the ISP BAN initiative, which is the Atlantic Smart Port Blue Accelerator Network, which is just been initiated and supported by Europe. The industrialization of the seaweed sector, which is quite big. I would like to mention Seaweed for Europe, for instance, as a first association, also pushing development in Europe. And of course, everything which is new products, new innovation, this has been mentioned about replacing plastic, replacing biofuel. There is a lot of new things and new opportunity to come in. Conservation program also is important because all the small, you can imagine that half of the earth is also implemented with small communities. So developing sustainable tourism, sustainable fishing, aquaculture, and micro infrastructure for the local communities and empowering them by small projects that we are aggregating by developing some financing scheme is as important as probably developing the big project. So syndicating large project and aggregating small project are both ways that we need to scale finance. Just an example on the maritime shipping sector. The maritime shipping sector today alone is it's a big emitter. It's 2%, 2.5%. But the way that we have to finance, there have been a lot of initiative which has been done in order to finance the decarbonization of the sector. But today, the only people who are financing the shipping sector is the banking sector. And the banking sector very soon will not be able to finance it alone. Why? Because the cost of capital of the banks, especially for long tenor, will be not sufficient, will be too expensive. So we will have to create new finance model, and probably by working on model with the insurance sector, we will have to create new solution for financing this. And we can see that the maritime transport is an important one. Other things, we have seen a lot of innovation and incubators, accelerator, venture capital, crowdfunding. There are plenty of them and good people and old friend of mine, and I'm very supportive of what they do. But when you look at the fund they have, even if it's already a good achievement, we're talking about 100 million there, 100 million there. So today we are struggling to put finance at scale. And why we're struggling to put finance at scale today? It's because investor has to shy. Investor has been always shy from ocean, and investor have not understood that the blue economy is the continuity of the land economy that we have developed, and maybe a sustainable alternative of many solutions. We have seen that with seaweed in the previous presentation. So we need to come with new finance, new innovative finance. So innovation create innovation platform. So without creating innovative platform dedicated to financing project, which will help us to de-risk, which will help us to provide liquidity, and where we will be able to value and sometimes monetizing the externalities like carbon, there will be very little chance to succeed in order to scale in the economy and the blue economy. And on addition of that, we need to bring corporates in. And here we have a good example with Van Oort, for instance, and we start to see more and more corporates being involved, because majority of the corporate do not realize that they will rely more and more from the ocean resources, from the ocean trade and shipping. It's only when you have the Suez Canal blocked by a boat that the people realize how much they depend on the ocean to get the supply chain fulfilled. And so the reliance on the ocean in order for the corporates in the future will be higher and higher. We do expect probably to rely less on soybean and palm oil and more probably on seaweed in the future in order to get ingredients for food, for instance. So this being said, we need to come with collaborative finance and innovative finance. So it means creating blended finance solutions. So I have little time here to go through that, but I would like to get a concept of bringing together private and public capital and philanthropic money in order to create projects when we could guarantee part of the risk and we could control part of the risk or de-risk part of the transaction based on off-taking. You realize that in what has been presented before on the seaweed, on the fish, on the aquaculture, you have a lot of offtake. So we can guarantee offtake, we can guarantee clean offtake, we can guarantee sustainable offtake. So if we can guarantee sustainable offtake, at the same time, we can bring public money or philanthropic money in order to be the catalytic, in order to finance projects that will be sustainable economy drivers. So I will come back on this in detail. I want to give you an example that on which we have worked recently is the Coral Reef Fund, where we put philanthropy, financial institution, private and United Nations agency together in order to identify projects that are not bankable to make bankable around the reef. And when we can de-risk private money in order to deploy after projects which normally will never be financed around the coral resilience here. So here you have an example of the way this has been structured, and it demonstrates here that we can put that in place by putting together some kind of skill which allow to bring junior tranche in order to de-risk a senior tranche, and where we can create a catalytic funding in order to incubate projects which normally will never be bankable, especially in emerging market countries. So there is a full set of solutions in finance, which has been today applied to the green. And for me, we don't have necessarily to reinvent the blue for the green. We just have to apply what has been done to the green. But this will not be sufficient. The existing project, especially from banking sector, will not be enough in order to finance this transition. There is a need to bring investor, and we need to bring to reinsure investor, and to bring at the same time the corporates. So we need to create collaborative financial solution when we, like the one I demonstrated before, which will help to finance those projects at scale. So this, and I would like to go quickly on this one, this will mean that we need to change behavior, which normally do not exist necessarily in finance. It means that we need to be much more collaborative, which is normally not the deal maker type of product that normally people work on. Collaborative financing is very important. We need to create innovative solution in finance, not new products, new solution. This is not the same. We need to think future, and not finance, credit, and financing is always based on the past. But we need to start to think about future scenario because it's going very fast. If you If you look to the past, you finance the past. Here we need to finance the future. So we need to anticipate, so we need to work on scenario. We need to base our decision making on big data. Big data is important, not only because we will have to measure the financial return and anticipate it, but also at the same time, we will have to measure impact. Measuring impact is becoming critical if we want to develop such kind of solution. Then after that, we need to be right in timing. So that means we need to be risk control the risk in finance, but we need also to reinvest in new product. If we continue to disinvest in fossil fuel, we need to be able to reinvest in alternative solutions. So we need to take risk. So it means that we need to have good data. We need to have also good timing in terms of disinvesting and investing. And finally, we need to recreate trust. We need to create solutions which are trustable. And this is only possible when we are transparent. So it's all about capital reallocation to the right business like the one has been presented before. And it's about using digital data, it's about creating partnership, and what we need to avoid, what will be the danger in the next few decade, probably in the next decade, is the greenwashing. So we need to make sure that we measure properly the impact. Thank you. More than happy to go more in detail later on.
Yeah, thank you, Pierre, and we're very much looking forward to discussing this with you in more depth in the Q&A session. I am informed that you can see me now, so maybe if you can see me, you can give some thumbs up in the Teams chat, and otherwise you will have to just continue to hear me over the audio. So yeah, thank you very much, Pierre, for helping us to understand which is something which is for many of us a very complex topic, which is finance, and to really inspire us and show us that there is a path forward and there is a way to collaborate and work with the existing financial institutions to really finance our ocean health and the blue economy. So really exciting. I would like to go to our next speaker. We're going to dive back into the startup world, and I would like to invite Richard to join us. And Richard's going to tell us something about one of the other challenges of the ocean, and that is plastics.
Indeed, I'm also going to try and, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, hi, my name is Richard Hardiman. I'm the CEO and founder of RAN Marine Technology, and we're all about robots in water. Robots extracting biomass, extracting plastics out of water in local smart city waterways, and then in marinas and harbors and rivers, and then shortly going sort of intercoastal quite soon as well. But I'll explain a little more about that. We're based in Rotterdam, and we're a group of 20 or so people who are roboticists, software developers, mechanical engineers, and an extremely sort of, I think, strong management team. We've been around for the last 5 or 6 years, based here in Rotterdam. What we do is we create software for our drones, for our ASVs, our autonomous surface vessels. We measure water quality data using those drones, and we build the drones here in Rotterdam, and then we send them around the world. So we are in around 32 countries at the moment. To date, and growing. Where we fit into the whole scheme of things is we use our drones, which sit in the middle, to remove pollution, toxicity, plastics, oils, biomass, and now cyanobacteria as well, out of the water, and then return them to our customer. That customer might be a water authority, so here in the Netherlands, or Gemeente, a municipal authority, a city authority, or a state authority that owns and runs the water, or more private clients, such as the ones we have in the US, like Disney and Universal theme parks. But what we do is provide the, I guess the easiest way to put it is we provide the tool to remove whatever you want in the water and return it back to land. So think of this as a Roomba for water, I guess, is possibly the easiest way to explain it. This is our main product that we have in the market at the moment. It's called the Wayshark, and this really is our little Roomba. We're able to send this around smaller canals and marinas and certain areas of lakes and rivers. And what it does is literally scoops up the trash or the biomass out of the water. This particular one can hold up to 160 liters. 200 kilograms of waste at any one time. We have two versions. We have a manual version which you can control by radio control from the shore, so a little safer than putting a boat out in the water. Or we have versions that are fully autonomous that you can control by just dialing into our customer portal and controlling however many drones you might have, telling them where to go, telling them when to return, and you can dive into what data they're sending back as well. As I say, we export around the world, so we're in around 32 territories at the moment. Some of our customers I mentioned: Walt Disney, Universal, Port of Houston, Plymouth in the UK, and then BIC in Australia. So we're in Sydney. We're heading to the Gold Coast now as well, and deploying a couple of other ones in Australia. Quite exciting for us. Singapore, a couple of our customers. We started out as a company that wanted to reclaim as much trash out of water before it got into the ocean. So our idea was to mitigate the spread of trash at source, to stop it getting past the harbour wall into the ocean. We would stop it by deploying an easier and more efficient method of capturing that waste, so that our customers would do it more regularly. They would be more activated to do it instead of trash sort of leaking into the ocean. In the last 6 months or so, we've started to progress more into the biomass, algae, macro and micro. And particularly now that we're opening up an office in the US, our focus more is biomass in those areas. Each drone that we send out has probes and data sensors attached. So typically we measure water quality in turbidity, pH levels, temperature, dissolved oxygen, etc. But we can kit our drones to take what our customers would like to measure while they're cleaning the trash. And all of that, again, as I said, is sent back to our back end. What I really wanted to talk to you about was the stuff that we're going to be doing this year. So at CES this year, we won an innovation award for our Shark Pod, which we're building here in Rotterdam and will be deployed in the harbour here in March. Basically, it is a mothership for 5 of our drones to dock, empty their waste out, and then recharge and then be redeployed. And as they grow, they get to understand their environment better. They talk to each other, and they get more and more efficient in the area that they're deployed in. As I said, we're building the first one here in Rotterdam and deploying that in March. And then we have POCs and pilots ready to go in the United States, in Canada, and more here in Europe at the end of the year to start really testing the solution out. We're also launching a bigger version. So the one you saw previously, the Waste Shark, is the size of a coffee table. This is the size of a bigger vessel. It's a 4 meter by 2 meter vessel and can take up to a ton of trash or biomass at any one time. Again, remote controlled, can also have an operator on board, but also autonomous as well. We're also into removing the not only biomass and plastics, but also fossil fuels as well. So we also have a prototype at the moment for a drone that removes harmful oil out of the water as well. And we hope to have that in the water by the end of this year. Rush through everything we do. We're a large-ish company, so I could speak for hours, but I'd be happy to speak more about this later in the breakout sessions as well. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. And perfectly, just as I was about to jump in and ask you, before we would jump to the next person, you wrapped up really nice. And again, I'm sure there's going to be loads of questions for you in the Q&A. Really great products which you guys are working on. So fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing with us. I would like to go directly to our next speaker. I'm very excited to welcome a female entrepreneur into our session this afternoon. So again, we are looking at another startup and someone who's really taking the lead in the blue carbon space. So Anne-Sophie, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, can you all see my screen now? Right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm very pleased to be here with you all today. My name is Anne-Sophie. I am a climate scientist and an ocean entrepreneur from France. I am the founder of Tenaka, which is a social business that regenerates the ocean. And I am also the Sustainable Ocean Alliance representative in France. So before I dive into the presentation of Tenaka, I would like to stress mind-blowing facts from the ocean. And this one was published in an IMF report in 2019, and it actually stresses the fact that if we restore and preserve the whales population globally, it will have the impact of 4 Amazon rainforests in terms of CO2 sequestration. And that is one out of many, many different showcases of the ocean that shows the resilience of marine ecosystems and the importance to regenerate them. Because as we said earlier, and I'm not going to go back into that as well, the ocean is our biggest carbon sink, our biggest climate stabilizer. And according to scientists, we can't mitigate global warming without restoring marine habitats. And that's exactly the mission of Tenaka. So we are a social business that develops B2B services. So we really address businesses, corporations, whether it is small startups or international groups that are willing to invest in the regeneration of our ocean. So we developed pluriannual programs in order to restore coral reefs and blue carbon habitats, thanks to extensive partnerships with local and scientific communities all over the world. And we also lead a scientific monitoring efforts on the long term, and we provide impact measurements, data, and technologies to our business partners. And as Pierre mentioned during his presentation, data, impact measurement tools, and science is really the cornerstone of our model. To dive a little bit more into our different solutions, we launched our coral reef restoration program in 2018, at the end of 2019, when I first launched Tenaka. This one is focusing on restoring coral reef in the heart of the most biodiverse and resilient part of our ocean, which is the Coral Triangle area in Southeast Asia. And so far, since our beginning, we have restored 4.9 acres of damaged coral reefs in that area. The second program or solution that we launched in 2020 is the Blue Carbon Program. And this one is focusing on the restoration of mangroves, which is one of the biggest carbon pumps of our ocean. And we are focusing right now on restoring Indo-Pacific mangroves, so in Malaysia precisely, because Indo-Pacific mangroves are known as being the most efficient in terms of CO2 sequestration. And so far, in a bit more than a year now, we have restored 17 acres of mangrove forests in Borneo, Malaysia. And for both these programs, so science is really the cornerstone of everything we do on the field. And we have developed a technology which is called Tenaka Science, which is actually a platform that enables our marine biologists on the field to gather the impact data that they collect on the field every month. And this platform then translates this raw scientific data to our business partners using data visualization tools. So the idea is really to spread awareness on the impact measurement tools and for our business partners to use this data to communicate transparently and scientifically on their impact, but also in order for them to engage their customers, their staff, their stakeholders according to their own business strategies. So 2022 is really our year of scaling up. So far, which you can see here on the map on the red dots, they show our active regeneration sites, so in Southeast Asia. This year, we are opening new sites in the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific Ocean. And by the end of next year, we will be present as well in Central America. So that's really to give you an idea of our next developments. And yeah, I would be happy to elaborate more on our business model or any other questions during the Q&A session. But I wanted to leave you with a very inspiring quote that I think is really the DNA of Tenaka, which says that rebuilding marine life represents a doable grand challenge for humanity, an ethical obligation, and a smart economic objective to achieve a sustainable future. So thank you very much to all of you for your attention, and feel free to reach me on social media, or my email is right here, and I'll be happy to talk more into the Q&A. Thank you for all.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. Another inspiring example of the work going on in the ocean health space. And I really like that you reminded us again why we are all here and why it's so important that we're all taking action and accelerating and getting work done in this space. I would like to go to our final speaker of this first part of this afternoon's event. And he is, well, you've met him already, but I can only say he's a great entrepreneur, but also a fantastic intrapreneur. So I would like to welcome Mario to the stage once more to tell you about the Ocean Health Initiative.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate the efforts that you're putting in this whole event. It's really great to see. And of course, I'm really inspired to see all these presentations, because some of these speakers we've been working with, but some also not. And all these presentations give actually quite some comfort that beautiful stuff is happening for our oceans. And I think that's all we need. As mentioned, my name is Mario Straatmans. I'm the Director for Ocean Health. We're an initiative of Van Noord, and we're entrepreneurs, so to say, as Rachel already introduced. We're trying to set up this initiative at a light speed to make impact for our oceans, and that's what we're aiming to do. And obviously, with the parent company Van Noord having 152 years of experience, we also know very much what the challenge is for the oceans. And I think it's been mentioned already quite often in this afternoon, but I think it's important to keep on stressing it. And I think everybody here in the call is obviously underwriting that the need for solutions for the oceans is tremendous. And it's a large part of the whole climate action that we're all looking for at this moment. And I think that the oceans don't get the stage yet that they deserve and that they need. Maybe to start with then a little bit, it's also sharing a little bit the journey that we went through as a team. First of all, of course, was digging into the problem. And especially, I think, and that's also a little bit the topic of my presentation today, the problem behind the problem. Our first step was to see, okay, so what contributes to the ocean? What are all the elements that have an impact on the ocean and are actually contributing to a sound and healthy ocean? And there's a lot of different aspects, but there are also aspects that maybe are a little bit less clearly on top of everybody's minds. Of course, all the flora and fauna, whether it's the fish or the seaweeds or the mangroves that are involved, they all have impact. But for example, also noise is a very good example. We're all relying on the goods that are coming from Asia to us, but all this transport comes with a huge amount of noise in our oceans, which is really hampering, for example, the fish to reproduce because they cannot find each other. And so there's also a lot of elements that maybe are not for everybody top of mind. And we've been looking into that and seeing also where can we contribute. So this part of this in-depth analysis that we did last year, of course, also is looking into what is happening, what is the status of all these aspects in the ocean, and what does that mean? And what we saw, of course, was already disturbing, but the deeper you dig into it, the more disturbing it becomes almost. And that's that you see all elements, and you see here arrows going up and down, but basically they all go the wrong direction. So whether it's too much sargassum in some spots, decreasing coral and mangroves, increased acidification, a huge increase in noise, all these aspects are basically going the wrong direction. And obviously that's one way it's clear for all of us that it's wrong. I think this is just a further explanation and a further clarification that the problem is more complex and needs more of our attention than maybe we think. Now, knowing all this, the question is, so what if we're looking at the solution? What is the solution for this? And luckily, I think also today that's what's coming by is there's many solutions in the making. There's all kind of research happening. There's all kind of startups developing new technologies. The UN and the World Bank are putting efforts in increasing the awareness around the oceans problem. So that's good. We think that there's one key issue that needs to be addressed, and that's not maybe getting the attention it should be, and that's the scaling of solutions. There's so many solutions around, and I think we probably should have more still, but the only issue is how can we scale this solution in such a rate and such a pace that it's actually impacting our oceans positively in a very quick timescale, because there's urgency behind the story. So this is basically the largest problem that we saw, and also, of course, which fits with our mission, and we think we can play a role. If you think about this problem, behind this problem, there's a couple of ways to increase the scale of the solutions. One of them is increasing awareness with the larger audience. And if you increase awareness, more people will find it important, will buy maybe goods that are based on ocean products, or at least sound and safe to the oceans, or everybody will install a filter behind their washing machine so that less plastic from our daily washing will come into the water system. So increasing awareness is one. Of course, there's also a group that are bringing attention to the problem, for example, through protesting. I think that's another one. It's also increasing awareness, which is scaling the issue awareness. But I think another one, an example that really fits where we can play a role is also business models. So if you take the economical approach to these solutions, if you are looking for the right business models or find the right business models, it's actually a way to scale solutions fast around the globe, and it's been done before. And I think there's initiatives at this moment that do the same with the whole problem around having available proper clean drinking water for the world's population. Energy is a similar one, it's a sustainable energy, but I think also in the oceans that can play a major role. So we started looking into what kind of business models are there currently in the oceans space. And here you see some examples. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list of examples, but some of that we looked into. Of course, it's the restoration of ecosystem, because some governments or some locations want their ecosystem to be recovered. One that's also clearly on the rise is the whole CO2 compensation. So CO2 compensation is a clear measure to fight climate change. It's not the final solution, because CO2 reduction of emissions obviously should be the core focus, but it is part of the potential solution is also the compensation of CO2. You see other ones, of course, everything around scaling up what's happening around fisheries. You can see all kind of seaweed and clam farming, also coastal protection, but also the digital part. And I think digital is a crucial enabler for the whole oceans transformation. So if you need to know, or when you're restoring ecosystems, you need to know what's happening. So is the coral growing? Is there more biodiversity coming? Are the mangroves growing and storing CO2? I think the measuring of all this will also be a crucial part, and obviously that will also means that there are business models there. So when you have all these business models, we took a next step and trying to make analysis of a step deeper on what these business models are and how relevant are they. And there's more behind this, but obviously I'm giving you only the summary, and it gives a little bit of idea how we looked at this. We looked at all these examples with, okay, so what's the ocean's impact? And you see that some of these models are more and less impactful for creating healthier oceans than others. The second one you see is very much about the economical approach. So what's the economic value of this? You see that some, for example, especially some ecosystems, if you take coral ecosystems, are hugely relevant for countries with tourism. So this has translate to a huge economical value for those regionalities. Another one is, for example, also with aquaculture. You also see there everything around fisheries and fish farming and shrimp farming. That's a huge economical value, especially for economies that need it very much for their local communities. The last one is, so where are the market developments? So are there actually already these dynamics of a client looking for solutions in this field? Is that already happening? And that's actually the last step that we need. If you want to develop a business model, you need the market, you need demand, and you need supply. So this is basically the analysis that we did, and that we brought us actually to more focus for the Ocean Health Program, where we wanted to start. As said, we approach this as a startup, basically. So that means that we're testing in the field now, where is the most traction and where can we find the first things. So explaining a little bit then what we do and who we are. This is basically our pitch, the way we try to approach everybody that's involved. And some of these are people here in the call. You work on the oceans on a day-to-day basis, but there's also quite some people outside that are not involved with the oceans. And I think that's very relevant, because that means that we're spreading also this whole item of ocean health to other parties. Our stories is oceans are broken. It's a clean-cut way to say what the problem is, and of course we can dive a lot deeper. But at least it says, I think, what we have on our hands. Current solutions are not a scale, and we try to bring to this field solutions that have the size and the scale to make impact for oceans that we need. So that really fits to our mission, contributing to the climate change ambition. That's the prime focus, and that's a change of looking at this from what we used to. And normally it starts with business, and you have additional sustainability objectives. We change it around, saying first for us, it needs to have a positive ocean impact. Otherwise, we're not doing it. That's our prime focus. Well, some examples of things that we are exploring. One, we've quite some experience with coral restoration. So we're looking into localities where currently coral is degrading, and can we, together with the local community, find ways to develop a quick restoration of coral, new breeding of coral, and expanding of the current situation that the coral is in. Another one is, well, you already heard it, and it comes back later as well, is the one that also C Combinator is focusing on, is what can we do with the sargassum blooms that are there around the world? And especially, I very much like the link to consumer products, because again, if there's more economical value, it also gives a bigger opportunity to scale. Of course, you need to watch all the dynamics behind it. So if you're collecting this sargassum, are you not impacting other nature in different ways? So it's quite complex, but I think it's starting to mature quickly, and I hope this has potential to grow as much as possible where it contributes. Another one that we also see quite some traction on is offering corporates for CO2 offsetting. So a lot of companies have targets to reduce their emissions, but also in the meantime to offset their emissions. Actually, that demand is growing quickly, and I'm in an impression at this moment that there's actually more demand than supply. So we're looking at ways, hey, can we build mangroves? Can we build other ecosystems that are a good way of a CO2 offsetting, which means that we can faster grow our mangrove ecosystems or other ecosystems, which can contribute to the planet and the oceans in different ways. So all these are examples of models that we're currently testing with different parties. And hopefully, yeah, goes where we want it to go. But again, also new models might pop up. That's actually where we're finding our journey. So, example, the CO2 compensation I mentioned. We're trying to talk to all different kind of companies. These are just names of examples of names of companies. Some bit more traditional companies, some newer companies. It's quite a challenge to see to get to all these clients. So if anybody wants to join us on this mission, we're very happy to cooperate. But we do see some first traction, and that's very positive. And I think that's only contributing, growing as every step that we take. So yeah, very proud. Jeff was one of the speakers running this really top class startup, C Combinator, really making impact. It's very positive to see where they're going and also the speed and the vision that they have. Again, I think scale is a crucial aspect. So we're running a pilot with C Combinator at this moment. We're very proud of it. We're very much impressed with the level and the depth of the knowledge that C Combinator is bringing to the game already. And I think Jeff shared the same picture, but it's very much from left to right, saying finding some organizations that are currently struggling with the sargassum blooms that are happening in the South and Middle American regions, collecting this sargassum in a good way and trying to make value out of this sargassum. It has a couple of dimensions, both in new consumer goods, but also in CO2 sequestration. So a beautiful example of one of those models. And again, we're currently testing where it's going, and everything looks very positive, but it also needs a very creative mindset to make these new models develop, design, and implement it, because it's never happened before. So it requires quite some traction from all the parties involved. Well, this is another example. This is a more research-based example. We've been looking in the Great Barrier Reef, and this has very much been around the restoration of coral, where we've been looking into collecting the coral slick and consequently making sure that it's being put at a place where it can grow fast and get traction fast. Quite a thorough research that we did, and it's given us a lot of insights in the potential of coral, and especially the restoration of coral. So these are very, very inspiring examples, I think, of the projects that we've been involved in. Well, almost coming to the conclusion of my part of the story. Yeah, this only works if you work with, I think, all the partners and all the players in the ecosystem. I personally come from a sector, the maritime sector, that's a bit more conservative, and comes from the position where they want to try to do all by themselves. Yeah, this is not, I think, where we are currently, and I think the presenters in this event already explained that better than I can. But partnering this with other organizations, whether it's NGOs, whether it's corporates, whether it's startups, whether it's investors, that's what will be needed to scale this up. And the flexibility and the creativity around the solutions, because this will not be a profitable business this year. Hopefully, like for example, offshore wind, it will grow there again because it will mean it scales, but it will need a lot of creativity, financing, and different parties involved to get to the level where we want to be. We've been talking to tons of companies. Of course, we always had this kind of picture are very dangerous because you forget people, but it gives you a little bit of impression of the ecosystem that we're talking to, and hopefully we hope to scale this conversation up. So finally, we've got to ask for you, if you want to partner with us on any of this, if you want to contribute to any of the solutions that we're building, if you know any companies that are interested in CO2 compensation or coral or other restoration, oceans related restoration, please connect with us. If you know any locations where this should be happening, we're looking currently into some locations, but we're also always looking into more locations. So all these questions are relevant for us. Feel free to connect. We're very happy to do that. You can do it, for example, through our LinkedIn, but there are also other ways. So please feel invited. And I think the only thing that leaves me is we've been building on this with a very dedicated team. I'm very proud of this group of people. They're extremely excited and enthusiastic. So hopefully also through our LinkedIn, you'll be able to connect with them as well. But we're happy to have you, and we hope you enjoyed at least this plenary bit, and we're going to the next session. But that again, I leave to Rachel.
Thank you very much, Mara. Thank you. And a great final presentation to end on. Again, very inspiring and really great to see, again, how you can connect ocean health also in an entrepreneur environment to really drive change in the ocean space. And I love that you set the boundary for yourself that we're not going to work on something unless it's having a positive impact on the ocean. So fantastic, and keep up the good work, Ocean Health team. Now, I hope you're all feeling energized by the great speeches we've seen. I hope you're feeling inspired, but I'm sure you are also all ready to share your ideas, your knowledge, and ask loads of questions. So with that, I would like to launch straight into what I would like to call the Connection Hour. I'm going to try and explain it to you. Technology is not my forte, so I will do my best. This is what we are going to do. We have 2 rounds for you in this hour, so approximately 20 minutes each. For each session, there are 6 breakout rooms which we have set up, so 6 different places you can go to. So you can think about which one you want to go for the first round and which one you would like to take for the second round. So starting with the first room, that's a Q&A with all of the speakers who you have seen in the first part of this session, which I will be moderating. If you have questions specifically for our Ocean Health team, then please go to the second room. The third room, the fourth room, and the fifth room is where we can really deep dive into the content of the specific topics which we talk about around ocean health. And we really have experts for you in those rooms for if you have questions on that. So room 3 is mangroves, room 4 is coral, and room 5 is seaweed. And then, in case you're not really sure who you want to talk to or what you want to ask, we've thrown in a 6th room, which is speed dating. So it's just potluck. We're going to pair you with somebody in that room, and then you can see who you get connected to and who you talk with. So like I said, you've got 2 rounds of this. So pick your first choice and your second choice. What's important is that the links are in the chat of the teams, but also you have received them in your email. I think they should also be on the screen now as well, the rooms. So yeah, again, if you don't have the chat function in Teams, then you should see the links within the email which you received. If you are staying for the Q&A with the speakers, then you can stay in this main stage room. And for the other options, so again, ocean health is room 2, mangroves is room 3, coral is room 4, and seaweed is room 5. And for the fun speed dating, that's room 6. So I would like to thank you all for joining the plenary session. You will be informed by your host at the end of the 20 minutes to go to the next breakout room. So sadly, I will not see you again this afternoon unless you're joining my session. So I hope you enjoy the connection hour. Thank you very much. We will start in 3 minutes. One extra thing which I need to add apparently is we have a small 3 minutes for you to find your way to the correct room. So we will see you in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to drop in and check that everybody has managed to find the room which they would like to go to. Do drop us a message in the chat if you're having any trouble with getting into the room that you'd like to go to.
It's just a matter of starting the discussion. Everybody is waiting for each other.
being overly polite, I think.
If I only want to talk with Pierre, then I was going to work in a group of a lot of people.
Hi, Renee, welcome. Good to have you here. Yeah, this is the Q&A for all of the speakers, Renee. So I'm getting some feedback, I see. You have to read? No, I don't know. Still get some feedback? No, I think we're good again. Yeah, let's get started with the Q&A for the speakers. What I would really like to do is ask people, because we have quite a large group here for the Q&A with the speakers, so please pop your messages in the chat and then I can help to moderate and make sure that all of the speakers get more time and we can combine questions that are covering multiple topics. So maybe if you can just, for all the people who have questions for the speakers, just pop in the chat who your question is for. And then I will come to you and ask you to ask a question. Raise your hands or something. Yeah, and if you're very handy with Teams, you can also raise your hand in the Teams. I will see it. Renee, you can also ask your question in the open forum if you like.
I wonder if Pierre has real examples.
Here, Renee, I'm here.
Yeah. Do you have real life cases where blended funding in marine infrastructure was a success?
Yes, I do have several examples, and especially it was not necessarily on the blue economy, as you have probably less project than on the land side, but it was on the land side, especially when you have plantation who want to protect the forest. So then we guarantee the offtake, and we allocate a catalytic fund in order to maintain around the environment and the ecosystem. So that's an example. So this has been done in Indonesia, in Africa, and it's deploying more and more. What is the Coral Reef Fund is a good example of what is starting on the sea. There is another initiative which is about to start on the coastal restoration, which is which will be launched next week in the ocean, One Planet Ocean in Brest, with Aura. Aura being the Ocean Risk and Resilience Alliance for Ocean. And Van Oort is, by the way, Van Oort is member on that association. And so we will launch this structure. There will be another structure quite interesting to be launched soon, the day before in Marseille, called PAMEX Fund, which will be include all the Mediterranean country and project. So there are several. It's starting to keep picking up. But what is important, if I want to say, to be successful, especially, you have two types of blended finance. You have the blended finance to finance a project. This is quite easy because you have one project and you can define it between the off-taker, between the different actors, the public and the private and the philanthropic, even if it takes time, but it's easier. And then the problem is that the majority of the project we do have, especially in the blue finance, in the blue economy, are small projects between 5 and 50 million, which is majority the project that you have also in emerging market. So conclusion, you need to create an aggregation of small projects with the due diligence probably a little bit more and probably less appetite from the investor. So this will require probably to create dedicated platform, and this is what we start to see with the Coral Reef, with the coastal fund, with the Mediterranean Fund, you start to create, it's not fund, by the way, it's called facilities. It's wrong when I say fund, it's facility. So where we can put together different solution of financing in order to gather all those projects. So this will come by creation of several platforms that will come out. And the other big project and the other big subject that we need to pay attention to is the use of the carbon as an asset and not only as a flow. Because if you use the carbon as a flow, then you cannot use it as a guarantee for funding. So we need to start to create new solutions where we are using the carbon generation as an asset. So at least we can create a financing facility against that asset. Like for instance, I'm working on the renovation of a lake, for instance, and the renovation of the lake will generate immediately 15 million tons of carbon. Then we measure it, we certify it, and then we use it in order to guarantee the investor as a guarantee for the investor who will invest in the project. So this kind of things need to be started. This is new. We need to create also a culture around that, and we need also to create tools which are clean, transparent, and definitely away from greenwashing, because if not, this is where the investor are still afraid of.
Okay, thank you.
That's really helpful, René. I hope that's answering your question. Some really good examples there from Pierre. And also, Pierre, thank you for indeed informing the audience as well that we are, as FNORD, also a member of AURA, the Ocean Risk and Resilience and Action Alliance, and some great work going on there and some great projects which we are working on as part of that. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We had another question coming in from Samantha, and I know you were asking Samantha for Anne-Sophie's email address, but you mentioned about the kelp forest work you are doing. Maybe you could share briefly with us the work you're doing as well.
Yes, the Kelp Forest Foundation is trying to basically do what Pierre is saying that the investors are so scared of, and that is to prove that a project is not greenwashing. But how do you prove that? And is basically assessing, one, the impact on biodiversity. How do you measure the positive, negative impact? That's what I was asking Anne-Sophie about, what she is using. Is she doing environmental DNA? I saw that you're using visual, acoustics, etc. And then also on the carbon sequestration potential of different projects. We are trying to assess the carbon sequestration potential of cultivated giant kelp forests, which is around a project in Namibia called Kelp Blue. And the ocean technology is a bit further behind than the land technology, and it tends to be a lot of times inaccessible for smaller projects. So the development of environmental DNA, for example, is quite fascinating, because that is allowing small projects like ours to be able to independently and transparently quantify the impact on biodiversity. So hence why I was interested in Anne-Sophie and how she, but I can have a separate conversation with her about it. But
I think it's fantastic for sharing what you're doing, Samantha. It's hugely interesting and of course massively relevant to the discussion which we're having. And I think you touch on something so important that a lot of people are trying to grasp, and that is about how we value the natural capital as a society, and how perhaps we use that to build scalable business models as well in this space. So thank you very much for sharing, Samantha. Hugely interesting, the work which you are doing. There was a question for Pierre, but actually I would like to redirect that to one of the people who are joining us from the startup world, about whether you see that investors are interested in investing in the ocean space. And Pierre, maybe you can follow, but first maybe Anne-Sophie, Jeff or Richard, you would like to say perhaps the challenges or obstacles which you experience as a startup in getting investors to invest in this ocean space.
I think that there's a want for investors to invest, but they're not coming through with typically the investors we're going through a round at the moment, and typically investors are looking at it, I find, as a very normal business case. So they're using their past experience to evaluate your current situation. I think that sometimes, particularly in the Netherlands and maybe Europe, makes it harder to get that investment. There's a lot of people who claim they are sustainable investors, impact investors, and so on and so forth. I don't think that always actually resonates when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of the deal they want to put together. That said, we are seeing some very good advanced talks with a number of different types of VCs. But I don't think I think there's a lot of talk, and when it comes down to it, they want to see a real business case, and obviously we are able to present that. But I don't think it's as clear cut yet for investors as it potentially could be.
So perhaps Jeff or Sophie, do you still believe that there will need to be philanthropic funding injected into this space to make these business models work? That's Jeff.
I'll go. We have found, I agree with Richard, we found many people we speak to who want to be in sustainability, but then you see that they invest in game apps or something like that. I mean, there are some really strange conversations that don't lead anywhere. But thankfully, like Richard too, we found at C Combinator, we found that turning the sargassum into products that are getting demand pull, like the emulsifier for cosmetics that bonds oil and water, for example. A natural version of that is getting a lot of pull from cosmetics companies that are getting pressure to go natural and to reduce their fossil fuel footprint. And so that's really, at the end of the day, yeah, all the funders really that we've seen, what they care about. And so thankfully, we've been able to deliver on that, and the biofertilizer for plants, and initial traction and good results there, and letters of intent, et cetera. We're pretty excited to be about to announce a major ocean fund that we think will be a big investor in us. But we don't, we found that you have to, the Venn diagram between impact and actually doing deals, and how much you weight traditional business models, as Richard said. It's much more towards a traditional business model. There needs to be more groups that are taking risks, I think, on ocean-based companies, which are seen as somewhat risky in general, much less seaweed, where we are really is seen as different, much less a type of seaweed that isn't kelp, right? So it's a education for all of us. It's 2-3 years ago, I didn't know about this space as much either. I don't know what, Anne-Sophie, have you found investors that are interested in the regeneration type work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I agree definitely with both of your inputs. And I think what I find interesting is that we find more and more VCs and investors that are looking not only on financial metrics, but also that are looking forward to merge the financial metrics with impact metrics, and impact in terms of CO2 sequestration or biodiversity or socioeconomic impacts. And I think that's really a great way forward, because we really need to have the both scopes put together when we are trying to raise funds. For Tenaka, so far we haven't raised external funds. It was important for me to start to launch our social business with our own funding, with our clients and partners, really to validate our business model. Yeah, we've been accelerated by an organization that you mentioned, by the way, I think, Pierre, during your presentation, which is the Ocean Solutions Accelerator. They're based in Silicon Valley, but everything was online, obviously, this year. And it was really a really great way for us to define our growth strategy and to meet up with many different investors and VCs from different spheres of oceanic and maritime issues. So yeah, we are planning for a first round at the end of this year, and yeah, we'll see how it goes.
That's fantastic, Anne-Sophie, and we're wishing you every success in that. So thank you for sharing. And maybe just keeping with this topic of quantifying nature and how to do that so that investors can perhaps value that more when you go for these kind of rounds. Maybe, Stefan, you also alluded in your presentation, or not even alluded, you mentioned about some things to do with value. And I think Anne-Sophie also mentioned this statistic that came out, and I also heard it at COP26 about the whales and how much value the whales have. from that perspective. Stefan, is this something which you guys are looking into?
Well, actually, that's a quite interesting question. How you could value ecosystem services from animals or from others into the overall picture, and that's something what we are at least looking into for seaweed or blue carbon. So where it's actually not, but for us, it's really important to get an understanding where we can create business models on ocean data across different data domains. So we are actually launching quite a large project in Germany on a maritime data space, where we also try to take care about those blue carbon effects on what is within the water. So starting from there, but then of course it would be next also to have a look into, let's say, what could be the effect of whales or from other ecosystem services that we can take into consideration if we restore ecosystems and so forth. It's quite an interesting sector, but not easy to handle with data from satellites or from vehicles in the sea.
No, indeed, Stefan, I think you touched on also there the complexity of it, and I see in the chat a few different methods are being mentioned, but indeed, ultimately not one approach has been agreed as the way forward. I think also, Pierre, not for the banking sector. There is not an agreed way forward for the banking sector on how to value natural capital. Are you muted, Pierre? Did you hear me, Pierre?
Yes. Hello?
Hi. Yeah, Pierre, I just was wondering if you would like to add from the perspective of the banking sector on this discussion about valuing of natural capital.
I think the banking sector, as I mentioned in my presentation, especially for shipping, unfortunately, the regulators in the past few years, by protecting more and more the short term, give little room for the bank to finance a long tenor project because the cost of capital now is very expensive. And this is why, for instance, financing shipping will be more and more. Banks are financing majority of the shipping industry, and they will struggle to continue to finance it because the cost of capital due to regulation set up by Basel IV is not very expensive for long-term investment. You can imagine that all projects we're talking about here, about infrastructure, offtake of seaweed, offtake of fishing, etc., are all long-term business. So this is why banks will probably struggle more and more for financing those kinds of business, except regulation change. So this is why the real people who can invest in scale are the large long tenor investor, insurance company, pension fund, and we do see Anglo-Saxon, especially Canadian, but also Australian. The Nordics fund also from Norway, from Holland, from Denmark, starting to move in that direction. Also, why? Because they understand that the blue economy is not a separated economy. It's an alternative and the continuity of the land economy. This is where we will find the solution of tomorrow, the solution of the future, in order to solve some of the issues that we are struggling now. Especially, you can see the seaweed can be a very good alternative to many of the resources that we have on the land today, etc., etc. So this is where we need definitely not to work with the large scale investor, but those people have mandate, and they have mandate with level of risk and liquidity which need to be adjusted. And this is where we can create blended finance by doing public and private. So we can allow those people to invest because part will be the risk by public money.
Yeah, thank you, Pierre. That's really insightful. And I saw that you've also added some extra information in the chat. So I think that's really helpful for all of our people who are joining us here today. Thank you for that. And I would like to end with one final question, which is directed at you, Richard, which is about coming from another company. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Akwai. And again, it's about the struggle to get investing going from proven pilots to early customers, convincing investors to finance in your growth. So maybe Richard, if you could take that final question, and then I will wrap up.
Absolutely. So, firstly, Acquire, you've got some amazing tech. I mean, I love the way that just the fact that you have fish drones is absolutely amazing. I think for us, I understand where you're coming from, because we speak to a lot of tech investors who want to invest in software, or they want to invest in hardware. Very few investors want to invest in the middle, where your hardware is powered by software. We found that grants, especially in the EU, have been magnificent for us, really, for our growth. And we've used those as almost the angel investment that we needed to start off with. In fact, a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the moment is being financed and built with the Horizon 2020 grants. We've got other applications in there at the moment. I think that what we find from investors is when you have a very clear idea of exactly what you want to do with your ASV. So a lot of people have robots that are in the water at the moment, but they can do many things. They can measure bathymetry, they can measure data, they can go around the world and sort of plot ocean weather and that kind of thing. But if you have a very clear idea of what that tool is that you've built, and you have a very clear idea of that market you're servicing, I think investors are a lot more understanding and willing to look at you. I think half the problem, and this is probably for all of us, is that because the ocean is literally such a new, I know this has been going for 10, 20 years, but it's such a new sort of frontier for investors, that the more explanation you have to do, the quicker they switch off. You know, we mentioned gaming apps. Gaming apps are kind of like easy. We understand what they are. We understand where the revenue comes from and how to get that kind of expanded quickly. I find when you talk ocean, when you talk robotics, when you talk sort of anything sustainability wise, it takes a lot longer for people to become an expert in it. So yeah, I think from our side, it's really it's having a clear idea of what your market looks like, because you have to talk like a business. So you have to show figures, but you have to show that sustainability and what you're doing on the other end, why your product is good for the environment and good for the investor. I think if you can clarify that message, it becomes easier, but it's not always as easy to get that narrative as clear for the investor. I think, Jeff, with your particular thing, we're looking at sargassum as a huge play for us in the next 2 to 3 years. But you know, we don't do anything with the sargassum. We have a very clear idea of how we want to harvest that sargassum in a zero emissions way, in a continual way with robotics. But explaining that to an investor, you know, is sometimes difficult, and we're working on that narrative at the moment to make it clearer. But yeah, it's all about your story, I think, at the end of the day, for an investor.
Great, thank you, Richard. Yeah, I think a nice link to also the work that Jeff is doing with the sargassum. I'm afraid I have to quickly wrap up because we've overrun on the first breakout session. So if anyone wants to take this moment, you are of course also welcome to stay in the Q&A with the speakers. But if you'd also like to take this moment to switch to one of the other breakout rooms. So again, if you'd like to talk with the Ocean Health team, or if you'd like to deep dive on a specific topic like mangroves, coral, or seaweed, or if you'd like to join the speed dating, then the links are here in the chat, or you can check back the email which was sent to you, which also has the links in. So I will just give 1 minute to see if everyone is going to switch, and then we will start again and see if there are new questions for the speakers. So 1 moment for everyone to see if they're going to switch rooms.
Oh, mic is on, sorry.
Okay, so let's start the second round. So just to reiterate, if anyone didn't want to continue with the speaker Q&A, do check the chat or your email if you would like to join any of the other discussions where they are deep diving on more of the specific topics which we discussed in the first hour. So you are more than welcome to do that. welcome to anyone who has joined us from one of the other sessions for the second part of the Q&A. I will try to be more timely with my timekeeping. So I would like to open up the floor again to everyone in the audience. Do feel free to pop your messages in the chat, the questions which you have for the speakers, or raise your digital hand if you are very tech savvy in Teams, and we will take your questions for the speakers. They are all here. So I think also great launching on from where we ended with the last session, where Richard was talking about investors and working in the ocean space. So anyone who has any questions around that, and I think what was fantastic in the first Q&A, and that's exactly why we're hosting this event, is to see the collaboration between the different speakers, but the different startups, and everyone is facing a lot of the similar challenges in this space, and it really puts the emphasis on the reason why we need to facilitate and provide these platforms for people to collaborate and work together on all of these challenges. So I see something coming in from Samuel, who's asking Anne-Sophie about the use of eDNA for reef restoration. It's an exciting potential area. Would you like to say something on that, Anne-Sophie?
Yeah, definitely. So totally agree. I think eDNA is really the measure we are all looking forward to when we work on biodiversity and especially coral reefs, but we also want to implement it in our mangrove and blue carbon restoration sites. Because, and so for those of you who don't know what eDNA is, I didn't know 6 months ago neither, is really the idea of doing soil sampling or water column sampling if you do it underwater, for instance. And send those sampling into a laboratory that can then identify the DNA of the species that were evolving into that environment. And so it's really a way for marine biologists to have a universal metric on biodiversity, because normally what we do without eDNA is basically sending divers and scientific divers to collect data manually. So people who go diving, and then obviously there is a lot of bias when you collect the data on biodiversity, especially underwater, because you are not here 24 hours and 7 days a week, and your presence also disturbs the natural environment. You make bubbles, the fish are scared, so you can't see everything that is happening here. And so eDNA is really a way for us to have this unified measurements on biodiversity. And for us, it's also an interesting way to do a before-after comparison, especially for our impact metrics on biodiversity, which is one of our 3 main axes of data sets. So we have biodiversity, CO2 sequestration, and social economic impacts. And for us, yes, it's definitely a way of to have this universal language when we talk about marine biology and biodiversity, and also a way to avoid the natural biases when you are a marine biologist collecting data. So yeah, we'd love to talk more about that. And we are partnering with a French laboratory, which is called SpyGen. If you want to have a look about them, they're really amazing. They're based in the Alps, but there are many other of them, I guess. But they have a really great animation on their website, which I'm going to send in the chat box, just for you to have a look, because it's really great.
Right, thank you so much, Anne-Sophie, and also for helping to explain to all of us exactly what eDNA is. Looking forward to the link in the chat. It's good for us all to get on the same knowledge and understanding level when it comes to these topics. So thank you very much, and thank you, Samuel, for the question. I think it's going to be a really hot topic going forward, so I'm looking forward to seeing more about eDNA. I also see a question from Ewout. Now, Ewout, I can read out your question, or maybe you would like to unmute and ask your question, or your question to the whole broader audience, not just the speakers, I believe.
Yeah, it's a question to all. My name is Ewout. Very good afternoon. I'm Dutch. I'm working 30 years in the marine industry, and I have a patented solution for a method to salvage very fragile subsea debris. And that can be old tankers or UXOs or chemical bombs or dumped barrels of radioactive waste or some things like that. And I think that's also a part of the ocean health. It's not only mangroves and seaweed, but this is also a health part. So I'm looking for partners to develop this idea into TRL 3 or 4. And of course, I also looking for funding possibilities. So if somebody would like to advise me, that would be highly appreciated.
Great, thank you for sharing, Ewoud. And exactly, you touch on there is a lot of opportunity and excitement around biodiversity, and that's incredibly important because we are faced with staggering biodiversity loss, of course, but we also still have to clean up the mess we have already made. So really nice to hear, Ewoud, you are working on that. So yeah, please connect with Ewoud in the chat if anyone's interested in working with that. I don't know whether any of the speakers would like to comment on Ewoud's suggestion or the patented solution that he has, or has any ideas for him on how he can take the next steps. Maybe someone from the startup world who's gone through these technology developments. Richard, yes.
Not too. Yeah. Okay. Even I think what you say you have sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm sure there's incredibly a lot of applications for it. Where to start? I don't know. To me, like a Van Oort or like that this might be an interesting place to start. I'm happy to chat and have a longer meeting with you and see what you're proposing and introduce you to the people that we've been speaking to. I can offer that at this stage and see whether that sort of helps you or takes you forward, or you're welcome to speak to our guys as well who do what we do on a daily basis. But, if it's a conversation starter, I'm happy to have that with you one-on-one as well.
Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation with you after this, just private, and let's take it from there. Of course, I like to roll it out, and I think it's a good idea. It would be a shame that we don't use it. There are a lot of problems to be solved. I think there's a lot of mess on the seafloor, like our moderator said. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We're already wearing team colors, I see, so that's good. It's a good start.
Great to see you guys. And Ewoud, I see already a couple more people in the chat who are very excited about your idea. So I wish you success in the next steps with that. And I see one of those people is even a colleague of mine here in Van Oord. So I hope I will see you again. So that's fantastic. I see that somebody has raised their hand. Chris, maybe Chris, you would like to unmute and ask your question to the speakers.
Yeah, thank you. So Chris McHugh, I'm from the University of Southampton. My background is finance, so I think this question is really orientated to Pierre. It's a question about scaling, because one of the things that I have come across is that in things like emissions, a lot of the banks and investors are so focused on emissions that it tends to squeeze out some of the other SDGs and some of the other priorities. I'm curious, in your travels, what's your experience of the appetite, once you get away from distinct projects, the appetite for larger investors and banks to fund things that are related to oceans, if you take out the emissions element?
Yeah. One of the points I want to come back is the business opportunities, and this is what has been presented by several people in the presentation. Is that there is a lot of new opportunities of business around energy, around seaweed, which is related to many different sectors: the food, the biofuel, the consumer, the plastic replacement, etc. So what is important to do is to understand the number of new businesses that can be developed today in the ocean. And this is what the investors do not understand yet. And why they don't understand that? Because the corporate today, the large corporate, have not embraced yet the importance of the ocean. If you look at the SDG 14 is the one which is ranked the lowest of interest by the corporates. And the corporates have not understood yet. I'm talking about the large corporates. And of course, I'm not talking about Van Oort or the people who are directly the 2 feet in the water. But I'm talking about the people who are in the food industry, people who are in the different industry, who do not. This is changing. This is changing. Just for your information, Michelin is far away from the sea. Michelin is starting a prospective analysis about what will be the impact of the blue economy in 50 years, because they do believe that maybe they have to change their business model, and they believe that probably there are things that they can do. The fact that we move the hydrogen around the port, the fact that hydrogen will be probably linked to the different industry, for the ferries or for some boats to be propelled, that may be changed also. So everything starts today. The problem of the ocean is a world of entrepreneurs, or is a world of old businesses. And so the old businesses need to transform themselves, number one, which is happening. And the entrepreneurs need to grow. The seaweed industry, for instance, in Europe, it's only comprising small entrepreneurs. And there is a miss of creating an industrialization of that. And this is what we need to promote. This is what we need to create awareness. This is why we need to create organizations like Seaweed for Europe, developing the ideas, starting to consult the investors. But we need to, with the investors will only follow if we can embrace, at least at scale, I'm talking about the scale people, at scale, if we can embrace the corporate and probably the family office who are in the industrial sector, who can finance projects. And for that, we need to create much more pilots, which are bankable, which are investable, and then we can start to demonstrate that there is a future for those businesses. It's moving, but we need to accelerate it.
Great, thank you, Pierre. Chris, I hope that answers your question. I see you nodding and smiling, so I'll take that as a yes. Thank you very much. I see we are coming to the end of the second session, and I'm really happy to see a lot of people sharing in the chat what they are working on. So I really hope that we've provided a platform here for people to connect and meet other people who are working in this space, because I will say again, only through collaboration will we really have true positive impact, exactly as you mentioned, Pierre, on SDG 14, where we all really need to work on. I think we can maybe take one final question, if anyone has a final question they would like to ask to the speakers. Silence. Any of the speakers who would like to make a final point or bring across a final thing they'd like to say?
Sure. I'd love to just ask Pierre or anyone else, have you ever seen, it seems to me, one overlooked avenue for climate positive startups is the ability to pre-purchase or pre-sell carbon credits. If you have a good chance of getting through, and it's quite certain you will, why is there not a market for being able to sell those in advance, which could fuel companies in this sector?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And yes, it's starting to be. The thing is that when you want to do a market, you need to have people to buy and to sell. And you need to have people also to get a proper system of verification and certification. I think the thing is that the people are they're still not in the full transparency. There are still some glitches going, but it's moving in that direction. And this is what I mentioned before. I think with a nature-based solution coming in, and the structure being built up around nature-based solution, we will start to have large projects like the one that you described, for instance, in the middle of the ocean when you can build farm, etc., which we can demonstrate that normally they are sustainable and they can generate massive amount of carbon. Then the carbon can be used as a guarantor, or as a guarantee. The future carbon that you will generate can be used as a guarantee in order to have some people to fund the project, because at the end, you will generate for that, we are working on a project which is called climate dividend. So we can attract the people to invest in the project, and so at the same time to collect the dividend of what they do in terms of carbon, instead to buy a credit carbon out of a project they are not been involved in. So this is the kind of ideas that we need to start. More than happy to discuss with you, Geoff, on this project and this initiative. After we need to have the regulator to accept it.
Well, I don't think it's for BNP, right? I don't think it's for the banks, right? It's for
no. The banks are not in that business. The banks are not in that business. Neither BNP or the banks.
Yeah. It's needed for
regulation is too complex. Regulation is too complex for banks. We are doing this. I can share with you some people who are acting involved in that. It will come from foundation, endowment people, and some specialized funds who are starting to do that.
Thank you, Jen. I'm informed we have until 5 past, but I can imagine some people have had to jump off the call already. I'm very excited to see one final question which popped up, which was how to have any ideas to get more women into this sector, which is a topic I'm very passionate about. So a fantastic question to end on, I think. So I wonder if any of our speakers have some words of wisdom, how we can get more ladies on the stage.
Well, yeah, I've been saying a few words in the chat, but I think that there are more and more examples, firstly, of women explorers or entrepreneurs or founders that can pave the way for inspiration for other women to follow their examples. Sylvia Earle is definitely my absolute goddess of the ocean sphere. And
yes,
there
Stefan really put her in the limelight, so I'm very happy about that, Stefan. Yeah, I think we are all fans of Sylvia Earle. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are many new programs, accelerators or incubators or VCs, even just specifically focused and designed for female founders. So I guess that's a good sign that there are many new infrastructures that are designed to bring more women in this sphere. But yeah, we need definitely more of them. And yeah, we'll reach out to you, Judith, with pleasure.
Yeah, great question, Judith. Thank you very much for that. I would also love to connect with you on this topic as well. So please do reach out. With that, I would really like to wrap up, unless any of the speakers have a final point they would like to make.
So good for me.
Great, thank you. And so with that, I would like to wrap and say thank you so much again to our speakers who've been incredibly inspiring. Also to me, so much new information and so excited to see everything which is going on in this space. And I really hope that everyone has enjoyed this event this afternoon and has found it a useful platform for collaborating and working together and connecting with new people. This was the first of these sessions, as Mara said in the opener, but we are of course hoping to host many more sessions on this topic and provide this platform to start getting people working together so we can really have that positive impact which we would all like to have. So once again, huge thank you to our speakers and thank you to everyone for joining us from around the world. And I hope we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.